You want to know why so many people are converting to Islam in 2025? Let's not overthink it. Let's just look around. People are tired. Tired of confusion, tired of noise, tired of chasing things that promise fulfillment but only deliver burnout. You know what they want: structure, meaning, peace, and Islam. It offers that straight, forward, unapologetic, and clean. You see someone go from chaos to calm, and you wonder what clicked. It's discipline. 5 daily prayers that reset your rhythm, fasting that trains your desire, charity that softens your grip on money. It's not abstract. It's real-world action with real-world results. It's not just theology. It's a blueprint for a life that works. And then there's identity. In a world where everything is fragmented, Islam says you belong. You are part of something bigger, timeless, global. Doesn't matter your background, black, white, Latino, Asian, rich, poor, formerly atheist, formerly Christian, whatever. There's a place for you, that kind of unity, that's rare now. And let's not ignore the information age. People aren't just hearing about Islam from headlines anymore. They're reading Quran translations on their phones. They're watching Muslims speak for themselves on podcasts, TikTok, YouTube. They're seeing past the filters, and what they find, it resonates. Simple as that. We're not talking about blind followers. We're talking about people who questioned everything and still chose this path. Engineers, athletes, artists, students, single moms. Not because they were forced. Because they saw something that answered the questions no one else could. In today's world, one of the most profound shifts in human behavior is the collective desire for clarity, structure, and peace. This isn't just a trend, it's a response. A response to an overwhelming wave of noise, distraction, overstimulation, and confusion. The modern world promises endless freedom and infinite choice, but those promises have come at a cost. Burnout, loneliness, disconnection, and a silent ache that success, material gain, and social validation just can't fix. In the midst of that ache, many people are turning toward Islam, not because of pressure, not because of trendiness, but because it offers something rare and deeply needed: a life built on rhythm, balance, and anchored purpose. When a person begins to question why everything feels so scattered, why their days blur together, why their thoughts spiral, why despite having what they wanted they still feel restless, they begin searching. Not just for answers, but for patterns, for structure, for something to hold on to. And Islam meets that need with precision. It doesn't just talk about peace, it implements it 5 times a day. That's where the structure begins, with the prayers. 5 daily prayers may seem excessive to an outsider, but for those who have taken that step, it becomes the very heartbeat of their day. It's not just about ritual, it's about rhythm. In a world that demands your attention every second, prayer demands silence. In a society that teaches constant motion, prayer teaches pause. Each prayer time acts as a reset button, a chance to detach from the chaos of the world and realign with something higher. It becomes more than a habit. It becomes a grounding force, and the result, mental clarity, emotional discipline, spiritual awareness, things the modern world can't offer with its apps and therapies and productivity hacks. But it doesn't stop there. Structure in Islam is also about timing. There's a reason everything is connected to time: when to pray, when to eat, when to fast, when to give. It turns time itself into something sacred, something valuable. So people who once felt like days were slipping through their fingers now begin to feel control returning to their lives. They wake up with intention. They organize their schedules around meaning, not just convenience. Suddenly, life has shape again. Then comes fasting. It's not just about avoiding food or drink. It's about breaking the chains of your own desires. In a world where indulgence is constant and self-control is rare, fasting becomes an act of rebellion. A quiet, powerful protest against the idea that you must satisfy every urge. Fasting teaches restraint. It teaches patience. It teaches you that you're not a slave to your cravings. And in that discipline, there is peace. Because when you learn to master yourself, you stop being controlled by everything outside of you. That's the kind of structure people are searching for, one that empowers them rather than restricts them. Islamic structure doesn't suffocate you. It doesn't box you in. It frees you from the invisible prisons you didn't even realize you were living in. The addiction to your phone, the constant comparing, the fear of missing out, the pressure to perform. When someone steps into Islam, they step out of that race. They stop living for likes and start living for something real, something higher. And that brings a calm that no vacation, no self-help book, no wellness app can replicate. Even the rules, what to eat, what to wear, how to speak, how to treat others, are not meant to control but to guide. Guidance is structure, and structure, when built with wisdom, is safety. People realize that having a clear line between right and wrong is not oppression, it's protection. It protects your mind, your dignity, your relationships, your soul. That clarity, that certainty, is something so many crave in a world of blurred lines. Take the concept of modesty, for instance. It's not just about dress, it's about dignity. It's about choosing how you want to be seen. It's about telling the world, I am more than my body. That's empowering, especially in a culture that constantly reduces people to images, to appearances, to objects. Many women, in particular, find refuge in that structure. They find freedom in being defined not by their shape or beauty, but by their character, their intellect, their submission to God. And in that submission, they find strength. Then there's zakat, charity, a system built into the structure of Islam, requiring the wealthy to give to the poor, not as an act of charity, but as a duty that changes the way people view wealth. It's no longer a status symbol, it's a trust. Something you'll be accountable for, and accountability itself is a key part of structure. Islam doesn't let you hide from your actions. Every deed, every word, every choice matters, not because someone is watching you, but because you are always in the presence of the one who knows everything. That awareness, it transforms the way you live. When people convert to Islam, what they often say is this: I finally feel peace, not because life got easier, but because life got clearer. And clarity is power. Clarity removes doubt, and when doubt leaves, peace enters. It's not about having all the answers. It's about having a compass. And that compass comes in the form of daily practices, regular rituals, clear moral boundaries, and a sense of connection that stays with you in the highs and lows of life. Even the greeting in Islam, Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you, is a reminder of what this faith stands for. Peace isn't just a goal, it's a way of being. And that peace is built through structure, through the daily, hourly, moment-to-moment practices that shape a person from the inside out. People are realizing that freedom without structure is just chaos. That doing whatever you want, whenever you want, leads to emptiness, not joy. And so they turn to Islam, because Islam gives structure without stripping away humanity. It gives direction without crushing individuality. It offers a path, not a maze. It's not surprising that in a time when people are flooded with choices, they're drawn to something that narrows the path and raises the bar. Islam doesn't flatter your ego. It refines it. It doesn't promise ease, it promises purpose. And that's what makes its structure so powerful. Because in a world chasing comfort, people are beginning to understand that true peace comes from discipline, not indulgence. In a world that constantly fragments people, by race, by nationality, by class, by gender, by belief, by opinion, there's a deep and growing hunger for something that brings People together, something that cuts across all those surface-level divisions and speaks to something deeper, more human, more eternal. That hunger is part of what's leading so many people to Islam in 2025. Because Islam doesn't just offer rules or rituals, it offers belonging. It offers identity, and not the kind of identity that's built on exclusion or popularity or fitting into a trend. It's an identity rooted in submission to one God, in being part of a global family, in knowing who you are beyond what the world tries to make you be. For someone searching, maybe coming from a background where they always felt other, or where they were constantly made to feel like they had to earn their worth, Islam becomes a revelation. It doesn't ask where you came from. It doesn't care about the status you held before. When you say La ilaha illallah, there is no God but Allah, you step into something vast and ancient, and yet something deeply personal. You're not joining a club. You're returning to your origin. That shift from being someone lost, scattered, or unsure, to someone who knows their creator, who knows their purpose, and who knows their people, that's a powerful thing. And it's not theoretical. It's not some abstract spiritual concept. It shows up in real physical ways. When a person becomes Muslim, they are immediately welcomed with open arms. They could be in New York or Nairobi, in a mosque in London, or a small village in Indonesia, and they'll hear the same words, Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. That greeting is more than politeness. It's a statement, a reminder, you are one of us now. We are brothers and sisters in faith. You are never alone again. That feeling of being seen, of being included without needing to perform, is rare in today's world. Most places make you prove yourself. You have to look a certain way, talk a certain way, vote a certain way, be cool enough, educated enough, rich enough. But Islam is not built on those conditions. It welcomes the janitor and the CEO the same. It doesn't care if you were raised in a broken home or came from a PhD family. The only thing that matters is your heart and your sincerity. That's why so many people say they finally feel like they belong when they become Muslim. It's not because their problems go away. It's not because they suddenly have perfect communities. But it's because they've stepped into something real, something bigger than themselves, and something that doesn't shift with trends or opinions. It's an identity that's rooted in the unchanging. This sense of identity is deeply empowering, especially in a time when so many feel lost. Think about how much of modern culture is built on identity confusion. People don't know who they are anymore. They don't know what to believe in. They're constantly changing to fit in, constantly adjusting their values just to be accepted. Social media has made this worse. It tells you that your worth comes from how you look, how you perform, how many people approve of you. But Islam doesn't care how many followers you have. Islam doesn't change depending on the decade. Its core message has been the same since the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Worship one God, live with purpose, and treat people with justice. That stability gives people peace, and that peace gives people strength. When someone becomes Muslim, they're no longer chasing validation from the world. They know who they are. They know that they were created with intention, that they are part of a spiritual legacy that stretches back through prophets and centuries. That sense of rootedness is life-changing, and let's talk about the global aspect of Islam. When someone says Ummah, they're talking about more than just Muslims in their neighborhood. They're talking about a worldwide community of believers, different languages, different cultures, different histories, but united in faith. It's not symbolic, it's tangible. You can see it in Hajj, where millions gather in white garments with no distinctions between them. You can see it during Ramadan, when Muslims around the world fast together, break their fast together, pray together, that unity is not something manufactured by institutions. It's lived every day in every time zone. For converts especially, this global unity is incredibly meaningful. Many of them come from places where they've felt alienated, whether because of their race, their background, or their struggles. In Islam, they find a space that doesn't erase who they were, but elevates who they are becoming. They find brothers and sisters who are not just friends, but family. They may not speak the same language, but they make dua for each other. They may not look alike, but they bow to the same God. This kind of spiritual equality is radical in a world obsessed with hierarchy. Where else can you find a system where a rich businessman and a poor orphan stand shoulder to shoulder, without titles, without comparison, united only by humility before God? That's not a concept. That's how Muslims pray 5 times a day, in mosques and homes and sidewalks around the world. That image alone speaks volumes. In that image is identity. In that image is a person who knows exactly who they are, a servant of the most merciful. Islam also reshapes how people relate to others. It doesn't just say you're part of a group, it teaches you how to treat that group. The rights of neighbors, the honor of family, the dignity of the elderly, the protection of the weak, the respect between spouses. It's not just an inner belief system, it's a social contract. And for people who have grown up in fractured homes or cultures of selfishness, this is revolutionary. They're not just finding a personal faith, they're finding a way to live with others that is built on mercy, fairness, and mutual respect. And it's not just about the good times. Islam gives you identity even in struggle. Especially in struggle, it tells you that your pain is not pointless, that your hardship has meaning, that when the world turns its back on you, your Lord never will. That level of spiritual security, that inner confidence, is part of what draws people to this faith. Because they see Muslims who, despite everything they go through, oppression, loss, racism, poverty, still walk with dignity, still pray with tears, still smile with hope. That's not weakness, that's rootedness. And people want that. They want to feel that kind of strength, that kind of peace, that kind of knowing. In Islam, identity isn't something you craft. It's something you discover. It's already there. You just have to return to it. The Quran reminds us that every soul was created in a state of knowing God. So when someone converts, it's not always a leap, it's a homecoming. And when they arrive, they realize they were never alone. That the doubts, the questions, the inner voice that said there's more to this life, it was all part of the journey back. And once they step in, they see that this identity is not built on shallow markers. It's not about how well you perform. It's about how sincerely you submit. That sincerity is what connects you to the people around you, to the prophets before you, to the Creator above you. And that connection is what holds you, shapes you, carries you. In a time when people are building identities from fragments, bit by bit, trend by trend, Islam offers something whole, something intact, something unshakable. People are tired of constantly reinventing themselves. They want to be grounded. They want to belong. They want to know who they are when everything else falls apart. Islam gives that, not through slogans or surface-level branding, but through timeless truth and community that walks with you. In the past, understanding a religion like Islam depended heavily on what you were told by others. That meant relying on media, school curriculums, cultural narratives, or the experiences and opinions of the people around you. And for decades, the story many people heard about Islam was incomplete at best and deliberately distorted at worst. It was shaped by headlines, not first-hand encounters. It focused on extremes, on politics, on fear. But that wall between perception and reality has crumbled in recent years. Now, in 2025, people are discovering Islam not through second-hand filters, but directly, through their screens, their searches, their conversations. And what they're finding often contradicts everything they were told. That moment of contradiction becomes a spark. Curiosity turns into research, research turns into recognition, and recognition, for many, turns into conviction. The digital age changed everything. You don't need a library or a religious studies class or a tour guide to explore Islam. All you need is curiosity and a phone. A quick search for what is the Quran can lead someone to an English translation of its verses. A question like "Why do Muslims pray?" might land them on a heartfelt YouTube video from a revert explaining their journey. A podcast episode can unpack misconceptions. A TikTok clip can show a convert tearing up in prayer. A live stream can capture the serenity of a night prayer in Mecca. These aren't staged public relations campaigns. These are real people speaking from the heart, sharing their lives. And that authenticity breaks through the skepticism and noise. This is why the internet has become one of the most powerful dawah tools of the modern age. Not because people are being convinced through arguments, but because they're being exposed to something deeply human. They see people who are grounded, who radiate peace, who speak with purpose, who cry out of love for God. And they start asking themselves, what do they have that I don't? There's something undeniable about watching someone your age, someone from your background, maybe even someone who once shared your doubts, now standing confidently in their faith. It disarms you because if they made that choice, not out of pressure, but through conviction, it makes you wonder what they saw. What did they read? What did they feel? Why did they change? And then the search begins. And that search is no longer blocked by gatekeepers or censorship. The Quran is online, the Hadith are online, stories of converts, scholars, students of knowledge, they're all one click away. And unlike before, these stories are not just academic or philosophical. They are emotional, they are raw, they show real struggle and real healing. Someone might stumble across a video of a woman who was once deeply depressed, unsure of her place in the world, who found hope and dignity through Islam. Someone else might see a former atheist talk about how science and reason led them to believe in a creator and eventually to accept the Quran as divine. These are not hypothetical people. They are artists, entrepreneurs, athletes, teachers, college students. And they are speaking for themselves, not through the lens of someone trying to define them. This matters because for a long time, Islam was presented as the other, foreign, backward, oppressive, dangerous. But the internet shattered that illusion. Now people are seeing Muslims as neighbors, classmates, co-workers, friends. They're seeing Muslims laugh, grieve, joke, reflect, succeed, struggle, parent, lead. They're seeing that Muslims are not a monolith. They are diverse in culture, language, ethnicity, and experience, but united by faith. And that unity in the face of diversity speaks volumes. It tells people this isn't a tribe or a trend or a regional belief. It's a universal truth. Even the Quran, once exoticized and misunderstood, is now accessible to everyone. You can listen to its recitation online, read its translation in over 100 languages, study its tafsir, hear reflections on its verses from scholars and laypeople alike. And when people take that first step, when they start reading for themselves, they're often shocked by what they find, not because it's complicated, but because it's clear. It speaks directly to the soul. It asks questions that cut through the noise. Do you not reflect? Have you considered the creation of the heavens and the earth? Is there any doubt about God, the creator of the heavens and the earth? These are not theological riddles. They are invitations, and for many, those invitations feel like they were written just for them. One of the most common things you'll hear from converts is this: I started reading the Quran just to understand, and I couldn't stop. Or, I read it expecting to criticize, but it spoke to me. That's the power of direct access. Without the filters of bias or fear, the truth has a way of speaking for itself, and it doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be heard. Social media also gives people a window into Muslim life in a way that used to be impossible. People now see Muslims celebrating Eid with their families, preparing for Ramadan with excitement, breaking fast together at sunset, standing in rows for prayer, feeding the homeless, helping each other in times of need. These aren't just rituals, they're moments of connection, and they resonate with people who are otherwise isolated. They start to wonder, what kind of religion builds this kind of community? What kind of belief system creates this level of discipline, love, generosity, and resilience? And it's not just observance that draws attention, it's transformation. When people share their before and after stories, the person they were before Islam and the person they've become, it touches something deep. You see someone who was angry, now calm, someone who was reckless, now focused, someone who was lost, now guided. Those stories don't need to be dramatic. Even the simple ones are profound. A person who used to party every weekend now wakes up before sunrise to pray. A woman who once felt pressure to expose herself now dresses with pride and self-respect. A man who was addicted to toxic habits now lives with discipline and purpose. That kind of change can't be faked. And it's not achieved by just adopting rules. It comes from the truth reaching the heart. People also notice how Islam answers the big questions. Clearly, concisely, powerfully. Who created me? Why am I here? What happens after I die? What is the purpose of life? These are questions that philosophers have debated for centuries, but Islam offers answers that are rooted not in guesswork, but in revelation, and that revelation, when read without bias, often strikes people with its clarity. It doesn't try to flatter you, it tells you the truth. It doesn't just soothe your feelings, it elevates your thinking. And in an age where confusion is everywhere, where people are told that truth is subjective, that everything is relative, that there are no real answers, Islam offers certainty. Certainty is rare, and people are starving for it. They're tired of ambiguity. They're tired of being told that meaning is something they have to invent for themselves. They're looking for something firm, something rooted. And when they find Islam, they find a world view that doesn't bend with trends or time. A world view that has been preserved for over 400 years and remains as relevant as ever. Even the criticisms of Islam are now working in its favor. Because when someone hears something negative, online, in the media, in a conversation, and decides to investigate it for themselves, they often discover the opposite of what they expected. They find that women in Islam are not oppressed, but honored. That the concept of jihad is not about violence, but about struggle, inner and outer. That the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was not a warlord, but a mercy to mankind. These corrections are powerful, because they're not being pushed by public relations. They're being proven by primary sources, authentic scholarship, and lived experiences. There's also a growing trend of people realizing that Islam doesn't contradict science, reason, or progress. On the contrary, it encourages critical thinking. The Quran is full of appeals to reflection, observation, logic. Many people who once thought Islam was irrational are now seeing that it's incredibly rational. More so than many of the ideologies that dominate today's world. And when they compare it to the emptiness of modern materialism, or the inconsistencies of secular philosophies, Islam stands out as complete, coherent, and balanced. So when people convert in 2025, it's often because they've had time to research, to reflect, to test what they're learning. It's not an impulsive decision. It's the result of hours spent reading articles, watching debates, following Muslim creators, joining online spaces, and slowly realizing that this path makes more sense than anything they've encountered. And when they finally say the Shahada, it's not because they were convinced by force, but because they were drawn by truth. This is the new reality. Islam is no longer distant. It's in your feed. It's in your recommendation. It's in your conversations. It's in your thoughts. And once it's there, it doesn't go away. Because once you see it clearly, you can't unsee it. Once you hear the Quran with an open heart, you can't forget it. Once you witness the peace on the face of someone who lives their faith, you can't ignore it. That presence, that axis, is reshaping everything. There is something profoundly moving about witnessing someone come to Islam, not just through learning or community or clarity, but through the undeniable, personal pull of the heart. It's not always about arguments or intellectual debates, though those can open doors. It's about a deep feeling, something spiritual, something invisible but real, pulling someone towards something greater. And this feeling, this unseen connection, is one of the most powerful reasons so many people are embracing Islam in 2025. Because sometimes, long before someone understands the details, they feel something stir. A kind of restlessness, a longing, a quiet whisper in the soul that says, there must be more than this. That whisper grows louder in moments of solitude. It shows up in the middle of the night when everything else is quiet, when the phone is down, when no one's watching, and a person feels the weight of life settle in. It shows up after success, when someone gets everything they thought they wanted, money, approval, comfort, and still feels empty. It shows up in grief, in loss, when someone is searching for meaning, for structure, for answers that this world cannot seem to provide. And in those moments, many people have described how Islam came into their lives not like a thunderclap, but like a soft, persistent light. Something they couldn't ignore. People will often say, I didn't choose Islam, it found me. And when they explain what that means, it's rarely about someone convincing them. It's about dreams. It's about sudden peace. It's about tears during their first exposure to prayer. It's about standing under the stars and feeling, for the first time, that they are being watched, not by a crowd, but by their Creator. These are not isolated cases. Every year, thousands of people describe spiritual moments that led them to explore Islam. They talk about how the name of Allah echoed in their minds before they even knew what it meant. How they heard Quranic recitation and felt their heart respond before their mind caught up. How they cried the first time they saw Muslims pray, even though they didn't understand the words. That kind of response doesn't come from propaganda. It doesn't come from a clever argument. It comes from the soul recognizing its source. Islam teaches that every soul, before it entered this world, testified to the oneness of God. That memory is buried deep inside us, and sometimes something awakens it. It could be a moment of despair, a moment of awe, a word, a person, a feeling. And when it awakens, the person begins to change. They start seeking. They start questioning everything they used to accept. They start pulling away from distractions, from addictions, from noise. And that journey is not logical at every step, it's spiritual. It's a kind of return, even the process of submitting to God. The actual moment someone accepts Islam is often described as deeply emotional. People say they feel a weight lifted off them. They describe a kind of clarity they've never known before. Some say they cried uncontrollably. Others say They felt like they were finally at home. And it's not because everything was explained. It's because their hearts were ready. Because even without knowing the full picture, they trusted the pull. They trusted that the peace they felt was real, and that trust changed everything. It's important to understand that this spiritual draw doesn't mean the person is naive or irrational. Many of them are thinkers. They've read other books, they've studied other faiths, they've lived through difficult times, but in Islam, they find something that answers not just their questions, but their soul's deepest need. They find surrender. And that surrender is not weakness, it is strength. It's the strength to say, I don't control everything. I am not the center of the universe. I am created, and my Creator knows me better than I know myself. That's a kind of freedom that this world rarely offers. In 2025, when anxiety is sky high, when mental health struggles are everywhere, when people are exhausted from pretending, that kind of spiritual grounding is more powerful than ever. People are tired of fake happiness, tired of chasing meaning in careers, relationships, entertainment, consumption, tired of being told to just manifest their dreams. They want something real, something sacred, and they're realizing that all along, their heart was guiding them to it. There's also a kind of beauty in Islam that cannot be explained, only experienced. It's in the sound of the Quran. Even people who don't understand Arabic describe being moved to tears by the recitation. It touches a place words can't reach. It soothes the heart. It calls you inward. People have reported listening to it by accident, on a plane, in a cafe, scrolling on their phone, and being suddenly overwhelmed with emotion. How does something you don't even understand feel so familiar? That's not coincidence. That's soul recognition. There's also beauty in the physical movements of prayer. The way the body flows from standing to bowing to prostrating is not just ritual. It's surrender made physical. And for people new to Islam, it can be incredibly moving to realize that the same prayer done today is the same prayer done centuries ago. That when you put your forehead to the ground, you're not just praying, you're connecting. You're stepping into the rhythm of the prophets, the companions, the believers of every era. That kind of timelessness creates awe. You're no longer just in your time and place. You're part of a spiritual legacy. This is why some people convert after one visit to a mosque. Not because someone gave them a lecture, but because they saw people praying and something inside them said, this is truth. This is how we were meant to connect with our Creator. Or they walked in and heard the Quran, and their heart answered before their mind could explain. That spiritual response is more powerful than persuasion. It cuts deeper than facts. It bypasses all the noise and goes straight to the center. And what's even more striking is how many people describe this draw to Islam happening in environments that are hostile to religion. In secular countries, in atheist households, in entertainment industries, in places where God is rarely mentioned, people still feel the call. They still find themselves asking questions no one taught them to ask. They still find Islam, or Islam finds them. That's not coincidence. That's something higher at work, because the soul knows. Even if it's been buried under years of distraction or denial, it still knows its source. It still yearns to return. Some converts describe moments of deep intuition, feeling that something was missing and not knowing what, feeling drawn to Arabic or fasting or modesty without understanding why, feeling connected to Muslims before they knew any. These signs build over time. They become undeniable. They lead to a moment where the person says, I don't have all the answers, but I know this is true. That level of trust, of surrender, is what Islam is built on. Faith, after all, is not about having all the evidence. It's about recognizing the signs and choosing to respond. It's also remarkable how people report their lives changing even before they say the Shahada. They stop drinking, they start praying in their own way, they start reading the Quran regularly, they feel their character softening, they feel their ego shrinking. That's the spiritual transformation already beginning. Because Islam doesn't begin with a label, it begins with the heart opening, and once it opens, everything else follows. This kind of transformation is deeply attractive to others. Friends, family, co-workers notice the change. They see the peace, they see the self-discipline, they see the glow, and that too plants seeds. Islam spreads heart to heart, not just mind to mind. It's not a product being sold. It's a truth being lived. And people are paying attention. In the end, what makes this spiritual connection so powerful is that it's deeply personal but universally recognizable. Whether someone is in Tokyo or Toronto, Cape Town or Cairo, they describe the same feelings, the same draw, the same sense of coming home. That consistency across languages, cultures, and experiences points to something divine, because only something from the Creator could resonate so universally. And once someone feels that pull, they don't need anyone to push them. The journey begins, the questions deepen, the heart expands, and eventually they say the words that align their soul with their Creator, not because they were convinced by an argument, but because they were called, and they answer.